On the distant planet of Zoreth 9, where skies were dark and the land was wild, there lived a creature that no one dared to approach. The apex predator, a beast unlike any other, roamed the planet's surface with terrifying power. Its black scales shimmered like night itself, and its eyes glowed with a ferocity that sent shivers through every being who saw it. Stories of this creature's might were told in whispers across the galaxy, and no one, not even the bravest, had ever dared to face it. But today, something unusual was happening. A human, small, fragile by alien standards, was stepping onto the planet's surface. His name was David, a human from Earth, and he was not like the others. His mission was clear: gather information, survive, and return home. But to do so, he had to face the impossible. Zoreth 9 was known for its dangers, its hostile environment, and its deadly creatures. No human had ever returned from here. Yet, David moved forward with a confidence that seemed out of place in such a hostile world. From a high vantage point, a pair of alien eyes watched. Lyra, a native of Zoreth 9, had been observing humans from a distance for weeks. She had seen their ships land and their people disappear into the wild, never to return. The humans, so fragile in comparison to the creatures of her world, were a mystery. She didn't understand why they kept coming here. What was it that drove them to these dangerous lands? To her, it seemed foolish. But this human David was different. Lyra had always kept a safe distance from the humans. They were unpredictable, and she wasn't sure what to make of their kind. But there was something about David's movements that caught her attention. Unlike the others, he did not seem afraid. In fact, he was walking toward the heart of the jungle, where the apex predator was known to hunt. The stories of this creature were terrifying. It had brought down entire colonies of alien settlers. Yet here was David, walking confidently through the jungle, carrying only a small pack and his weapons. Lyra narrowed her eyes, her antennae twitching. The human was too brave or too foolish for his own good. No one survived the apex predator. No one. She had heard the legends of its strength and agility. It could track its prey for days, even in the densest of forests. Its claws could tear through metal. There was no escaping it. And yet, here was this human, with his strange confidence, moving closer to the heart of the danger. Lyra's curiosity grew. She had never seen a human act this way before. Most of her people avoided Zoreth 9 altogether. Some would visit to study the planet's wildlife, but even they never ventured this deep into the jungle. Yet David seemed undeterred. He didn't flinch when he saw the massive clawed tracks of the predator, or when the wind carried the faint, unsettling growl of the creature's hunt. He simply moved forward. Lyra shifted her position, quietly moving from tree to tree, keeping her distance but watching closely. She wanted to know what drove this human to risk his life. Was it bravery? Or was it something else, something more? The alien world around them was alive with danger. The trees were tall, their branches thick and gnarled, casting long shadows on the forest floor. Strange, colorful creatures flitted through the air, and every step David took seemed to stir the quiet in the jungle. His every movement echoed in Lyra's sharp ears. It was like he was daring the planet to test him. Suddenly, there was a shift in the air. Lyra could feel it, a presence, moving swiftly through the jungle. She tensed. The predator had sensed David. The apex predator was close. A dark shadow passed between the trees, and then, from behind a thick cluster of ferns, Lyra saw it, the creature. It was massive, with razor-sharp teeth and claws that could tear through anything in their path. Its body was covered in dark scales, and its eyes glowed with a dangerous hunger. David stopped in his tracks. He knew the predator was near, but he didn't run. He didn't hesitate. He simply stood there, his eyes scanning the jungle, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Lyra couldn't believe it. Was this human not afraid? Did he not realize the danger he was in? The predator would not let him survive this encounter. Yet, something about David's stance intrigued her. He wasn't running. He wasn't screaming. He was calm, too calm for someone who was about to face death. Lyra's mind raced. Could he actually defeat the beast? Or was this just a fool's errand? Whatever happened next, Lyra knew she would witness something that would change everything. For a moment, there was only silence. The jungle, usually filled with the sounds of wildlife, seemed to hold its breath. The predator was watching. David was waiting, and Lyra was caught between awe and disbelief. Could the human really survive where no one else had? In that moment, Lyra realized one thing. She was about to witness the most unexpected battle Zoroth 9 had ever seen. And she would never look at humans the same way again. The air on Zoroth 9 was thick with tension, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Lyra watched in disbelief as the human David stood his ground. The massive apex predator, lurking just beyond the tree line, let out a low growl that echoed through the jungle. Its eyes, glowing with an unsettling intensity, locked onto David. The beast was closing in, its massive form blending with the shadows, moving with a terrifying grace. David didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. This was madness. She had watched countless creatures meet their end here, torn apart by the apex predator in seconds. Yet, the human seemed unfazed. There was something in his eyes, something calm and resolute, that told her this was not the same as the others. This human wasn't here to flee. He wasn't here to beg for mercy. He was here to fight. The predator's claws scraped against the rocky ground, sending sparks flying as it advanced toward David. Lyra could feel the heat of the creature's breath from where she stood. It was so close now, too close. The predator pounced. David moved in a flash. It was as if time itself slowed. With a swift, practiced motion, he rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's massive claws. The predator's swipe cut through the air, missing David by mere inches, but its rage was palpable. The creature's roar reverberated through the jungle, shaking the leaves from the trees. It turned, eyes burning with fury, and lunged again. David wasn't so lucky. The beast's massive tail whipped around, striking David hard across the chest. He was sent crashing into the thick, thorny bushes that lined the jungle floor. Lyra winced, her heart stopping for a moment. The human had taken the blow full force. He had to be injured. No human could survive an attack like that, yet, against all odds, David pulled himself up. Blood dripped from his lips, but his eyes were full of fire. He wasn't done. Not yet. Lyra could hardly believe what she was seeing. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were also resilient. This one, especially, seemed determined to survive at any cost. David wiped the blood from his mouth, his gaze fixed on the predator, now circling him like a shark sensing weakness. The battle had only just begun. And already, Lyra was beginning to wonder if the impossible might be possible after all. Could this human actually defeat the apex predator? The predator lunged again, its jaws wide open, aimed straight for David's throat. But David was faster. With a fluid movement, he ducked beneath the beast's jaws, grabbing a long, jagged rock from the ground. With all his strength, he drove it into the creature's side. The predator howled in pain, stumbling backward, its claws scraping against the earth in a desperate attempt to regain balance. Blood spilled from the wound, dark and thick, splattering across the jungle floor. Lyra gasped. She had never seen anyone, alien or human, strike the creature like that. The predator was wounded, but it was far from defeated. It was angrier than ever, its pain turning to rage. It turned on David once again, its eyes filled with a primal fury, but David wasn't backing down. He moved with precision, with a purpose that seemed beyond his years, beyond his strength. Every movement was calculated, every strike with intent. The predator's attacks became more erratic, its fury clouding its judgment. It was a powerful beast, but it was also an animal, driven by instinct. David, on the other hand, was too calm for someone facing certain death. The human lunged forward again, ducking under the predator's snapping jaws, and with one swift motion, he reached for his weapon, an energy blade. The blade hummed to life, its light glowing like a beacon in the dark jungle. David slashed at the creature's leg, cutting deep into its thick hide. The predator shrieked in pain, stumbling backward, its massive body collapsing to the ground. With a thud that shook the earth beneath them, Lyra stared in awe. She had never seen such skill, such raw power from a human. David's attack had landed a decisive blow. The predator was down but not out. The battle raged on, neither side willing to give in. David, breathing heavily, wiped sweat and blood from his face. His hand tightened around the energy blade, his resolve unwavering. He had been on the brink of death just moments ago, but now he was more determined than ever. His eyes locked onto the predators, and for a brief moment, Lyra saw something. In them a spark of defiance, of strength. David wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something more. Something that neither the predator nor Lyra could yet understand. As the predator slowly rose, David stood tall, preparing for the next round. The jungle seemed to hold its breath as the two forces, human and beast, faced off once more. The battle was far from over. The jungle air was thick with tension, and the only sound was the heavy breathing of both the human and the wounded predator. The mighty beast, its glowing eyes now dimmed by pain, was slower than before. It limped slightly, blood dripping from its jagged wound, but its hunger for the kill had not faded. Its predatory instincts were still sharp, and its rage had only grown. David, however, was not afraid. He stood tall, his chest heaving with each breath, but his eyes were clear. The energy blade still hummed softly in his grip, its blue glow casting an eerie light around them. Despite the blood staining his clothes and the pain from the predator's earlier attack, he was focused. This battle had become more than survival. It had become a challenge of wills. Lyra, still hidden in the trees above, watched in awe. The human was no longer reacting out of desperation. There was purpose in every move he made now. His stance was steady, and his gaze never wavered from the creature before him. She had never seen a human fight like this. The way he controlled his breathing, how he moved with precision, every strike calculated to weaken the predator further. It was unlike anything she'd witnessed from any of the other humans who had dared to step onto Zoratha-9. The predator roared again, this time more out of frustration than fear. It charged, its enormous claws cutting through the air as it lunged toward David. But David didn't retreat. Instead, he sidestepped with a speed that made Lyra's heart race. The predator's claws missed by mere inches, swiping at nothing. But David didn't wait for the creature to recover. He moved in fast, his energy blade flashing as he sliced at the creature's side, this time with more precision. The predator howled, its massive body stumbling backward, trying to regain its footing. But David was relentless. He pressed the attack, his blade flashing in the dim light as he slashed at the beast's exposed underbelly. Lyra couldn't believe her eyes. The human wasn't just surviving. He was gaining the upper hand. She had expected him to be outmatched, like all the others. But here he was, striking with a precision that seemed almost unnatural. It was clear that David wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to win. The predator, wounded and bleeding heavily now, seemed to hesitate. It bared its teeth in a final attempt to intimidate the human, but David's eyes remained unwavering. The predator circled, its movements more cautious now, but still full of raw power. It was testing David, looking for any weakness. David's grip tightened on the energy blade, and he let out a slow breath. The predator made another lunge, faster this time. It seemed to calculate David's every move, attempting to outsmart him. But David was quicker. With a sharp twist, he dodged the predator's strike and spun around. Positioning himself perfectly in one fluid motion, David drove the energy blade deep into the predator's shoulder. The beast let out a shriek of agony as the blade pierced through its tough scales and deep into its flesh. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The predator's body convulsed, and its claws scraped against the ground. But it couldn't break free. David's face was determined, his eyes locked onto the beast as it writhed in pain. Lyra watched, her heart in her throat. She had never seen a battle like this before. This human, this fragile being, had defied the impossible. He was taking on the planet's deadliest creature, and winning. The predator's struggle slowed, its powerful limbs twitching as the energy blade pulsed within its body. David, still holding the blade with steady hands, pushed deeper, securing his grip. The beast let out one last, pitiful growl before it collapsed, its massive body crumpling to the jungle floor in a heap. Lyra's eyes widened as she took in the scene. The human stood victorious over the fallen creature, breathing heavily but unbroken. The battle had ended. Against all odds, David had defeated the apex predator. David slowly pulled the blade from the creature's body, his face unreadable, as he looked down at his fallen opponent. The jungle was eerily silent now, save for the distant rustle of leaves in the wind. For a moment, it felt like the world was holding its breath. Then, David's gaze shifted upward, as if sensing someone was watching. His eyes locked onto the trees where Lyra had been observing. She froze, unsure if she had been spotted. But David didn't move. He didn't shout or run. He simply stood there, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his gaze calm and unyielding. Lyra's mind raced. What was he thinking? Why hadn't he reacted to her presence? And then, with a small, almost imperceptible nod, David turned his attention back to the dead predator. He had done the impossible, and now, it seemed, he was waiting for something else. The jungle was deathly quiet, save for the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. The mighty apex predator, once the dominant force on Zoroth 9, now lay defeated on the forest floor, its massive form sprawled lifeless in a pool of its own blood. David stood over it, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his brow. He had just faced the impossible and won. Lyra, still hidden in the trees above, watched in stunned silence. She had never seen anything like this before. No creature, no matter how powerful, had ever survived an encounter with the apex predator, let alone killed it. The human had done what no other had dared even attempt. But what happened next made Lyra's heart race with confusion. David's movements were slow but deliberate. He didn't walk away from the kill. Instead, he crouched beside the predator's body, his expression calm, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. He unstrapped a small, sharp blade from his pack and carefully began to cut into the creature's tough hide. The action was surgical, methodical. He wasn't just making a kill. He was preparing to feast. Lyra's stomach twisted in disbelief. The humans had no real understanding of the Zoroth 9 ecosystem, no knowledge of the creatures that roamed the wilds, yet here he was, about to consume the flesh of the planet's deadliest predator. Did humans do this on their homeworld? Did they eat their enemies? David worked quickly, his hands steady as he stripped away the predator's thick scales, exposing the tender flesh beneath. The air around him was thick with the scent of blood, and Lyra could smell the overwhelming stench of death as the remains of the creature lay before her. But David's focus never wavered. His fingers moved with practiced ease, cutting through the creature's tough hide, carving out slabs of meat. With a final, decisive cut, David pulled a large piece of the predator's meat free, placing it carefully beside him. He didn't hesitate. He pulled a small fire starter from his pack, setting a flame to the wood he had gathered earlier. It flickered to life, casting an orange glow against the blood-soaked jungle floor. Lyra's eyes were wide, her thoughts racing. Was this how humans survived? By eating the very creatures that hunted them. She had assumed they were soft, fragile beings who relied on tools and technology to survive. But David was different. His survival didn't rely on advanced technology or cunning tricks. It was a simple, brutal force of will. And now he was going to eat the very beast that had tried to kill him. As the fire crackled, David skewered the chunk of meat on a long stick and held it over the flame. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, a mix of alien blood and charred meat that made Lyra's stomach churn. But David didn't seem bothered. His gaze remained steady, focused on the task at hand. Lyra's mind reeled. Why wasn't he afraid? Didn't he realize the significance of what he was doing? This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was a statement. David wasn't just taking a life. He was asserting his place in this world. He was showing the planet, the predator, and perhaps even himself that he would not be afraid. He would not be weak. And then something shifted. As the meat began to cook, David's face softened. For the first time since he had set foot on Zoroth 9, Lyra saw something in his eyes that wasn't focused on the hunt, the battle, or the predator. It was quiet satisfaction. David took a small bite of the cooked meat, his expression unreadable. He chewed slowly, thoughtfully, as if savoring the moment. Lyra's stomach twisted again, this time in confusion. Could this human really be so indifferent to what he had just done? Was this just another victory for him, or was there something deeper, something she couldn't understand? Her thoughts were interrupted by David's voice, a low murmur that seemed to break the silence around them. "You could have helped," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "But I guess that wasn't your choice to make." Lyra froze. He had spoken directly to her. His voice, calm and steady, seemed to resonate in the air around her. How could he possibly know she was there? For a moment, Lyra's mind went blank. Could he see her? Was he speaking to someone else? But as she watched him, there was no sign of panic, no attempt to hide. He wasn't concerned with being watched. David took another bite of the meat, the flames dancing in his eyes. The jungle was quiet again, save for the occasional crackle from the fire. Lyra remained motionless, unsure of what to do next. For the first time, she wondered if the human knew something that she didn't. The fire crackled quietly as the scent of burning flesh mixed with the rich, damp smell of the jungle. Lyra couldn't tear her eyes away from the human, who sat just a few meters from the fallen body of the apex predator, casually eating the meat of the very creature that had nearly killed him. The quiet satisfaction on his face only added to the strangeness of the moment. For the first time, Lyra felt a flutter of confusion, mingled with something else, a sense of unease. She had always thought humans to be weak. Their small bodies, their soft faces, their reliance on tools and weapons. But here, David had proven something that no other human before him had. He had shown that he wasn't just a survivor. He was a force to be reckoned with, and that, more than anything, unsettled her. Lyra had heard the stories of humans, how they had come to Zoroth 9 in search of resources, how they had been wiped out by the predators, never to be seen again. The planet was hostile to everyone, even her own species. No one could survive here long term, not without paying a price. And yet, here was David alive, strong, and unafraid of the planet's most fearsome beast. It was like he was claiming a part of this planet that no one else had the right to. David took another bite of the meat, and for the briefest of moments, Lyra saw a flash of something in his eyes. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't anger. It was something more profound, something that made her question everything she had believed about humans. That was this pride. Lyra's mind raced. She had studied countless species, but humans? They were an enigma. She had watched their struggles, their defeats, their moments of desperation. But this human David wasn't just struggling to survive. He was thriving. even in a place that had destroyed countless others. The apex predator was dead, and the jungle was quiet. Yet David wasn't running. He wasn't afraid of what came next. He was simply existing. For the first time, Lyra was unsure of herself. She had watched for so long, from the shadows, trying to understand why humans came to her world, only to vanish. But now, as she observed David, this human who had just eaten the flesh of the planet's apex hunter, she found herself asking why she had never considered the possibility that humans weren't just here to survive. They were here to conquer. The question haunted her as she weighed her next move. Should she confront him? Should she speak to him? Or should she leave him to his victory and watch from the shadows, as she had always done with others? The predator was dead, but something else had shifted in the air. There was a new presence in the jungle, and it wasn't just the human. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves around her. Her antennae twitched in response. She could feel the pulse of the jungle, the underlying rhythm of life that flowed through everything. There was a shift, a movement within the balance of things. And David, this human, was at the center of it. She had never before felt such uncertainty. She had always known her place in the grand order of things. She had always been an observer, a passive participant in the struggles of her world. But now, for the first time, she wondered if it was time to stop observing and start engaging. What if this human was more than just a threat? What if, in some strange way, he was the answer to something she hadn't fully understood? David finished his meal, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes lingered on the fallen predator. For a moment, and Lyra saw a flicker of something in his expression, a sense of finality, of completion. Then he stood, stretching his muscles as if the battle had been nothing more than a warm-up. With the same casual grace, he began to pack up his things, seemingly unaware of the alien watching from the trees above. But Lyra knew better. He wasn't unaware. He had sensed her presence long ago. He had spoken to her earlier, even if it had been in a soft murmur meant for no one but himself. She wasn't sure why, but she couldn't shake the feeling that David knew she was there, that he had always known. The jungle felt heavier now, charged with the strange tension that only a confrontation could bring. Lyra could feel the weight of the moment settling in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was afraid, intrigued, or both. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. She had watched David claim the kill of the apex predator. Now the question was, would he claim the jungle too? And if he did, what did that mean for her, and for everything she thought she understood about Zoreth 9? Lyra perched high in the trees, watching David move with quiet purpose. The fire had burned low, leaving only glowing embers behind. The jungle around him seemed to breathe a little easier, as if it had come to terms with the fact that the predator was no longer its greatest threat. But even with the apex predator dead, Lyra couldn't shake the unease she felt in her chest. She had been observing humans for weeks now, watching them struggle, fight, and often perish on this unforgiving world. They were a strange species, fragile, yet determined. They seemed to exist on the edge of survival, never fully able to thrive in the harshness of Zoreth 9. But David was different. He wasn't merely surviving. He was shaping the world around him, carving out a space where no human had ever dared. Lyra shifted on her perch, eyes narrowing. David had spent the last hour preparing his equipment, carefully checking his weapons, and securing supplies in his pack. But it was his calm demeanor that unsettled her the most. Most creatures in Zoreth 9, even her own kind, would have been exhausted after a battle like that. They would have sought shelter, hidden from the dangers of the jungle, and recovered from their wounds. But David? He wasn't even bothered. His movements were measured, efficient, like he was already planning his next move, not just recuperating. Had shown skill, bravery, and physical strength that far exceeded anything Lyra had expected from a human. But there was something more, something deeper. It wasn't just his resilience or his quick thinking, it was his mind. She could sense it now as she watched him methodically prepare for whatever came next. There was something strategic about him, a cold precision in his every action. Lyra's antennae twitched, her thoughts racing. Could it be that David wasn't just a mere survivor, like the others she had watched before? Could it be that humans, in their relentless pursuit of survival, had unlocked something far beyond their fragile bodies? She had always underestimated them. Perhaps she had underestimated him. But now, as she studied David, she realized he had a strength that went beyond sheer physical power. He had an ability to assess and adapt, to think and calculate with a level of clarity that most creatures in the galaxy couldn't match. The realization hit her like a jolt of electricity. David was not simply a product of his species' weakness. He was a human who had tapped into something else, a relentless drive, an unshakable will that allowed him to adapt to every challenge, every obstacle. And that, she realized, was what made him truly dangerous. David finished preparing his pack and stood still for a moment, gazing out into the jungle, his eyes scanning the surroundings as if calculating the next step in a complex equation. Lyra could see the glint of intelligence in his gaze, the way he absorbed every detail around him. He wasn't just reacting to his environment, he was controlling it. Without warning, David turned toward the dense forest and began walking, his footsteps light but purposeful. Lyra hesitated, caught between curiosity and caution. She knew this. Human was no ordinary traveler. He was someone who had found a way to survive and thrive in a place where survival was nearly impossible. And as he moved through the jungle, with his energy blades still attached to his belt, Lyra couldn't shake the thought that David wasn't just trying to survive. Zorath 9. He was going to conquer it, the deeper they ventured into the jungle. The more Lyra felt the weight of this realization settle over her. The predator's death was only the beginning. David wasn't just looking for safety. He wasn't even looking for answers. He was looking for power, control. He wanted to reshape the very world around him. Lyra's mind world. She had spent so much time studying the creatures of Zorath 9, analyzing their behavior, understanding their instincts. But David was something new, something she hadn't encountered before. His presence was like a ripple through the jungle, disturbing the natural order. He was not content to merely exist alongside the wilds of Zorath 9. He was intent on mastering them. Her thoughts were interrupted as David paused in his tracks, his head tilting slightly. It was as if he had sensed something or someone nearby. Lyra froze, her heart racing. Had he finally realized she was watching him? Was he about to confront her? But instead of looking up into the trees, David simply reached for his weapon, his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't looking for danger, he was ready for it. Whatever came next, he would be prepared. For the first time, Lyra was unsure of her next move. The human had shown her something she had never anticipated, the true depth of his power. It wasn't just physical. It wasn't just about survival. It was about the mind, the ability to control, to manipulate, and to adapt to any situation. She couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if David did conquer Zorath 9? What would happen if this human turned the tide and made the jungle bend to his will? Would he be a force of nature, as powerful as any beast? Or would he become something else entirely, something she couldn't yet comprehend? The jungle around them felt different now, as if the very air had shifted. The scent of the earth was heavier, the wind sharper. Lyra's heart raced, her senses heightened as she observed David move deeper into the heart of Zorath 9. She had never expected to feel this way, uneasy, uncertain. But this human, this lone traveler, had changed the game. And with each step he took, the world around him seemed to bend to his will. David had already proven himself by slaying the apex predator, a feat that had shattered everything Lyra thought she knew about humans. Now as he moved with unwavering Focused through the dense jungle, Lyra wondered if he was about to do the unthinkable. Was he about to become more than just a survivor of Zoroth 9? Was he about to claim it for his own? Lyra followed, her curiosity gnawing at her every step. She had never been so torn before, never felt so conflicted about what she was witnessing. She had always remained on the sidelines, observing, never intervening. But David had disrupted everything. He wasn't just challenging the predators of this world. He was challenging the very laws of nature that governed it. He stopped suddenly, as if sensing something in the distance. The jungle had grown eerily quiet, the usual sounds of life hushed. Lyra's antennae twitched. Something was coming. David's hand moved instinctively toward his energy blade, his grip tightening around the hilt. He was ready, and there was no hesitation in his stance. His eyes were locked on the distant shadows, focused, calculating. He wasn't waiting for danger to approach. He was seeking it out, prepared to face whatever challenge Zoroth 9 would throw at him next. Lyra, instinctively, moved to a higher vantage point, crouching low against the trunk of a thick tree. The tension in the air was palpable. She could feel the jungle holding its breath, as if it, too, was waiting for the next move. Then, it appeared. A massive creature, one she had never seen before, stepped into the clearing. Its body was covered in iridescent scales, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intelligence. This was no ordinary predator. This was something older, something more dangerous, a being that seemed to embody the very essence of the jungle itself. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had never encountered a creature like this before. It was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, its presence commanding the entire landscape. It was as if the jungle had given birth to a force of pure destruction. David didn't flinch. His gaze never wavered as the creature slowly advanced, its eyes never leaving his. This wasn't a battle for survival anymore. This was a confrontation of wills. The creature's jaws snapped open with a deafening roar, but David was faster. With a precise flick of his wrist, he ignited his energy blade, the blue light flashing brilliantly in the dimming jungle. He moved with purpose, fluid and calculated, as if he had anticipated this moment all along. The creature lunged at him, its massive claws slashing through the air, but David was already beneath it, striking at its underbelly with the sharp blade. The creature let out a guttural cry of pain, stumbling back, its glowing eyes widening. In surprise, for the first time, Lyra saw the true power of David. The human had not only overcome the predators of Zoroth 9, but he had now come face to face with a force that the jungle itself feared. And he was holding his ground. The battle was swift, brutal, and mesmerizing. David was a whirlwind of calculated strikes, each movement precise and lethal. The creature fought with a savagery that seemed to come from the deepest corners of the jungle, but David met it with unwavering resolve. In the end, it was David who stood victorious once again. The creature lay defeated at his feet, its glowing eyes dimming as its life force ebbed away. The jungle, once alive with the sounds of beasts and life, was now eerily silent. David, panting from the exertion, wiped the sweat from his brow. He surveyed the scene, his gaze sweeping over the fallen creature. The jungle was his, at least for this moment. He had claimed victory over everything it had thrown at him. But Lyra could see the subtle change in him. He wasn't just basking in his triumph. He was looking beyond the battle, his eyes scanning the jungle as if he was considering something greater, something more profound. The fight had ended, but David's journey was far from over. He turned slowly, his gaze piercing the trees, as if he knew he wasn't alone. Lyra froze, unsure of what to do. Was it time to reveal herself? Was it time to confront the human who had claimed this world as his own? David took a slow step forward, his eyes still locked on the trees. And in that moment, Lyra realized what he had done. He hadn't just survived Zoroth 9. He had conquered it. She could no longer watch from the sidelines. The human had revealed something she couldn't ignore, a power, a force of will that was unlike anything she had ever encountered. And now she had to decide, would she fight him or join him?